Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you happen to be. My name is Carmen Mazzara. I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, to which all of your institutions belong. I'm so glad to welcome you to another one of our career webinars. And I do hope you'll join us not just for this event, but for all of the different kinds of employers that we're able to showcase for you. A recording of this session will join the other recordings of our past career webinars on the APSIA YouTube page after this event is over. So I encourage you to check there as well if there's other content that perhaps you missed, or if you'd like to revisit all of the great wisdom that will be shared with us today. I'm delighted to be joined by Risha Patel from McLarty Associates, who will be able to talk with us about the great work that they do at the association. She's going to briefly outline and overview their work, and then we'll definitely open the floor up to all of you for questions. If there's something you'd like to make sure you don't leave without us covering, you can feel free to put that in the chat now, and we'll get to those sorts of pieces later. If you have any technical issues, feel free to post it either broadly in the chat or to direct message me, and we will do our best to share some great wisdom with you. I also want to welcome at least one APSIA alumnus that I see on the line. We're so glad to have you here. And I'm sure if we called on him and were kind enough, he would share his wisdom about the transition from being at an APSIA school into a firm like McLarty. And so with that, you all are here to hear from Risha Patel, and I'm delighted to turn the floor over to her now. So Risha, please.
Thank you, Carmen. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to see you all virtually. And I think that warm introduction was very kind. So as Carmen said, I'm Risha. I'm the associate at McLarty Associates, and I've been here for a little bit over a year. I work in our hiring as well as recruiting and outreach for primarily our intern and graduate fellowship, but also associate level positions that come up periodically. So I'm here today to talk a little bit more about what McLarty Associates is, what is the work that we do, and hopefully interest you in some of the work that we do, and generally get to know one another better. So I will have some slides up, but this hopefully will be a bit more of an informal conversation. So please hold on to any questions that you have till the end. We'll have plenty of time to talk through some of those questions. Great. So just diving right into what exactly is McLarty Associates. So McLarty Associates was founded in 1998 by our co-founder and chairman, Mr. Thomas Mack McLarty. He was the chief of staff to President Bill Clinton at the time. And he was also joined by Nelson Cunningham. So Nelson Cunningham is our co-founder and current president of McLarty Associates, who also served in the Clinton administration. So both of these gentlemen brings a wide array of experience from working in the White House and beyond. And with their experience and their contacts, they wanted to know after they've had this experience, what should they do next? So especially considering the expertise and connections they had in Latin America, they decided to found the firm McLarty Associates. So we consider ourselves a State Department for the private sector, but generally McLarty Associates is a global strategic advisory firm. And from the beginnings, we primarily worked in Latin America. So the regional practice there was Latin America and Brazil and Southern Cone. And from there, the firm grew. So we opened up our practice areas, region by region, and also by industry and sector. So you can see a bit on the timeline. From 2004, we opened our New York Financial Services office. In 2008, we opened our McLarty Media practice. That's some of the most interesting work we do, which I'll talk about in a bit. In 2010, we opened McLarty China practice, which is a small office based in China. In 2014, we opened our inbound practice, which is considers lobbying and North America type work. 2016, we opened our Singapore and Brussels office. So these are two satellite offices that we have based both in the country. And lastly, but not least, most recently, we opened a New Delhi office. So we partner on the ground with a consulting group there. So as you can see, little by little, the firm grew both in scope, in the size of the team, and the work that we do. But right now we have about 60 full-time staff based in DC and a total of about 100 staff worldwide. So we have senior advisors, directors, based all around the world, and we collaborate as one team. So you'll notice that on the screen, there's also Kissinger McLarty Associates. So at the very beginning, the firm was founded also in partnership with Henry Kissinger. So I know many of you, that's a very familiar name. So that was just a fun fact about the origins and the partnership with Mr. McLarty and Mr. Cunningham. And so our functional trade practices, functional regional practices are listed here on the screen. So this is currently where we serve our clients. In Northeast Asia, we serve Korea and Japan. We also serve China, which is considered part of the East Asia practice. Our practice is also based in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So recently, with the news going on with Australia, France, tensions rising, that's been something of interest to our clients. We've been working there. India and South Asia, of course, is one of our practices with their New Delhi-based team. Africa is broken up into Northern Africa and the Middle East, as well as Sub-Saharan Africa. And then Northern Latin America and Brazil and Southern Cone remain the bulk of where our client work is today and remains the largest part of our firm, both in client work and team members. The Europe and Eurasia practice is supported by our Brussels team, which is located, of course, in Brussels, but on the ground. So we have a small team there. And lastly, our Middle East, North Africa, and our McLarty inbound practices. So many of the teams and the members that work on each of these practices have experience. With directors and senior advisors, they bring many years of experience working in these countries. And our junior staff members also have experience either working on the ground in these countries or are functional experts in these regions. You'll see on the bottom, there are functional practice areas. So the most notable are trade. So we have quite a few leadership members and senior advisors who have been working with different chambers of commerce and different entities of government and business across trade. And as well as the McLarty media practice. So some of the work that we do in the McLarty media is consulting with different Hollywood big budget films and major film studios on issues of international interest. So helping develop their storyline so it's accurate, as well as any logistical work they need to bring actors, film crew to different countries. What are the visas, the regulations they need to get their employees there and film the actual production there. So that is also part of our Middle East and Northern Africa practice. So like I said, McLarty Associates is considered a smaller firm when you look at the big scope of the type of consulting firms and strategic advisory firms in DC. But I think that is definitely to the benefit of the type of work that we do and what we're able to offer our clients. As a boutique firm, we offer very tailored deliverables to our clients. So no one thing is the same from one client to the next. And we're able to track issues for our clients that might be niche. So very small areas of issues or regulatory environment that they might not be able to catch on their own, that we're able to consult and help them with. So jumping right into the types of clients that we can mention. So our client work is typically focused on Fortune 200 companies, but we also do advise smaller companies as well as NGOs, nonprofits, government entities, et cetera. So it's pretty much a mixed bag as to who comes through our doors. We also have an array of types of institutions and companies and organizations we advise across industries and sectors. So that includes retail, manufacturing, construction, defense type companies, et cetera. So you can take a look on our website, which I'll link shortly in the chat, to the type of companies and the sectors that we work in. But in a nutshell, what McLarty does for these clients is that we develop and execute a government relations strategy for our clients, and that encompasses a whole array of things. So it can be a simplified market entry problem. So let's say X company wants to enter Y country and they've never been there before. So they look to McLarty Associates and ask, what are the risks for entering this country? What are the benefits for entering this country? What does the current market look like for my industry in that country? Who are the main competitors? Who should I get to know as the government leaders in that country to make sure that I can make that first move accurately? So oftentimes, it's considered that government and the private sector, government and companies are on two ends of the spectrum, right? They don't always get along. And so there are groups like ours that hope to have and make dialogue between the two that can be productive. And oftentimes government and companies and different organizations, they do have the same interest, but often cannot align on that. So we help get the conversation going. We help both groups stay informed about each other's interest. And most importantly, we help them build trust. So some of the deliverables that we offer our clients are stakeholder mapping. So again, knowing who are the key players on the ground in that country or market, crafting a tailored message. So again, protecting the reputation of that company and saying what they want to say, but in the right way. And lastly, we help arrange that high-level engagement. So many of our leadership team, our director team, our senior advisor team come from their former ambassadors, former diplomats, as well as former business leaders, and they've worked in all array of nonprofit spaces, government spaces, and everything in between in multilateral institutions. And so they have both the reputation and the connections to make sure that high-level engagement is productive and protects trust on both sides. So here are some examples of the types of services that we offer. So I would say the first one is the most common, where we help develop intelligence to guide that strategic decision. So collecting the research, collecting all the factors that the company needs to make a decision. The second point became very important during the COVID pandemic. So helping companies overcome regulatory barriers and obtain regulatory approval. So with the disruption in supply chains, for example, with the restrictions on travel and vaccination, acquiring vaccinations, these were all different obstacles that many individuals and companies had to deal with in the last year or so. So organizations like ours were very crucial to understanding what exactly is happening on the ground rather than what is being said. And like I mentioned before, we help elevate our clients' engagement with governments. So again, protecting their reputation, ensuring that there is trust, not just for this transaction that they're conducting, not just for this product that they're looking at, but for future relationships. We're really helping both teams develop that relationship for long-term success. And lastly, again, protect that reputation of our clients among government stakeholders. And so our team works together to make sure that both the strategic vision of our company is carried out, as well as the government interests are being both protected and abided by. Some other examples of client deliverables that especially our junior staff gets to work on includes strategy options, so compiling that list of valuable contacts that the company should be aware of, drafting up different scenarios that the company might interact with or might come up if they do begin to engage in that country, and general memos and briefers. I only say this because as we'll get into in a little bit further, one of the main things that we look for as new interns, graduate fellows, and associates joining our team are strong researchers and writers. And then lastly, we help clients flag an opportunity. So knowing which opportunities, both in DC or abroad or happening at a multilateral institution or international institution, what is an opportunity for them to get their foot in the door? So companies often don't know that they can get the full backing of a US embassy, for example, in their country. And so we help, again, mitigate the uncertainty on both sides, as well as put trust in both organizations' hands. And so something I would say just generally, when we look to how our junior staff plays a role in the work that we do for our client work, is that our interns and graduate fellows especially play a really, really key role in gathering all of this research. It's about knowing where to look, who to turn to, and knowing what information is valuable to our clients versus what is not valuable. And a lot of that comes from your own background and regional expertise, but a lot of that is also intuition and communicating well with your team. So a hiring trend that I'm seeing across this industry of strategic advisory, of international consulting, is knowing, taking that information, like I talked about, knowing who it's valuable for and how to present it in a way that they both understand what you're saying, and it's in their interest to take that information and run with it. So having that knowledge and expertise is definitely important, something you get from your academic experience, but translating that depth and that knowledge into practical application is something very, very important moving forward in this industry. So talking a little bit more about the intern and graduate fellowship. So interns and graduate fellows are divided up. So interns are current or recent undergraduates, and graduate fellows are considered current or recent graduate students. So I believe the bulk of you would follow in the graduate fellowship portion. Both are full-time and part-time paid opportunities that are offered on a semester basis. So that's spring, fall, and summer. And the only difference between the scope of work between an intern and graduate fellow would be a graduate fellow would probably be offered a little bit more depth into the type of research and the writing tasks that they're conducting, as well as probably more access to client work and being able to engage with client work from there. But on the whole, both interns and graduates, we look for strong researchers and writers, like I mentioned, who demonstrate an interest and expertise in the region. So for when we open up applications for each semester, we have an intern and graduate fellow opening for each regional practice. And so what we're looking for primarily is to see that how does your application and experience fit well with that regional practice. That doesn't mean that you can't list other regions or other areas of the world where you might have experience or talent or interest in working in. But I would say definitely highlight the region that you are applying for as the primary space of interest. From there, interns and graduate fellows will work closely with their supervising associate in their regional practice and get their hands on both client work and supporting the team's long-term goals. And when there is availability and also a need, an intern and graduate fellow can also help cross practices. So let's say you have an interest in a different regional practice, you are more than welcome to reach out to that practice's associate, get to know them, get to know the work that they do and support that work as well. And that's across not just regional practices, but also the functional areas that we work in. So trade, business development, McLarty media, graphic development, et cetera. So going with that, so working across teams is definitely a key part of the role as an intern and graduate fellows. And with that, we look for people who are team-oriented as well as efficient communicators. For this past year, all of our interns and graduate fellowships have been remote. So that communication aspect is even more important now as we look to the spring semester. We want to be able to know that you can work both in a remote environment, work across time zones, because oftentimes our regional practices are across time zones, knowing that you work well both remotely and that you can work with the other associates if you have different working styles. So in short, being able to demonstrate that on your application is definitely very important. Something I will mention also is that for any given semester, we have about 5 to 11 interns that we hire. Again, this is based on the need of each semester. So if you look on our website at our careers page, on one semester, it might be 3 internships that are posted, and in the summer, it might be 12. But generally, I would say the summertime is when we hire the most new interns and graduate fellows. If you see an opportunity that comes up during the spring or fall that doesn't align strongly with your interest, I would recommend you definitely look for those summer openings as well. But generally, we also look for students and individuals who are able to think complexly about international issues, are able to track the news, especially in their region and across different regions, and be able to make the connections as to what are these international issues doing across regions, but also especially for our clients. So thinking about both private and public stakeholders is very important as well. So this is looking a bit more into our hiring process. So once applications open up, they will actually be posted on our careers webpage, as well as on our Twitter and LinkedIn feed. So I advise you to follow us on Twitter and follow us on LinkedIn, because that will also be shared there. And once the position opens up, and let's say you are successfully looked at as a strong candidate, then you'll be invited for a timed research exercise. This is a 90-minute writing exercise on a given prompt. Nothing too much to sweat about. I would say it's very much of the type of work that you would be performing as a graduate fellow. Just research on a given prompt, and you can use the internet. This is a good time to point out that academic writing is very different than the writing we conduct in the business world. Academic writing can be long, detail-oriented, maybe even a bit flowery, but business writing is for memos. It's for executives who don't have much time to read through everything. So definitely demonstrating that your writing can be concise, to the point, also clear, but proper is the type of writing that we're looking for in that research exercise. So if you complete the research exercise successfully, you'll be invited for a couple rounds of interview. First round would be with your associate in the regional practice, and the final round would be with the director of the regional practice. And we will work with you if you have a variable schedule based on the type of position it is, whether it's full-time or part-time, as well as the start date. So if you're coming from a quarter system or a semester-based system for your school, we will work with you to figure out what schedule works best for your start date. On that note, I would also advise, if you are interested in applying, to very carefully read the application posting. It lists especially language requirements that we have for each regional practice. Some practices require a language, while other practices prefer that language. So again, please read carefully. And lastly, I would add in that we do require US work authorization for working as a graduate fellow at McLarty Associates. If you have CPT or OPT eligibility, we will work with you to figure out if that eligibility carries over and if the dates work, etc. So those are the two work authorization requirements that we have. I will also add in that our associate positions are offered on a periodic basis. So these are full-time permanent positions for the regional practice. And these are offered when an opening occurs. So again, I advise you to look at our careers page, also follow us on our social media to know when those openings occur. But I think I will stop right there and open up the floor for any questions, if that sounds good, Carmen.
And I will throw the McLarty careers page into the chat for all of you. While you're typing your questions, since my mic works, I have the privilege of the first question. Risha, I'm curious, you talked about a strong emphasis on the regions and the different regional work that they have. For students who might be studying cross-sectoral issues like security or development or business, how are there ways that students can translate that if they do feel like they're a good fit, or should it really be the kind of regionally focused degree or that kind of thing that you're looking for in a candidate?
That's a really good question, Carmen. So definitely, yes. In short, you can still apply and join the team, even if you are considered a generalist or you have multiple regions of expertise. You definitely do not need a regional degree or anything like that. But I would advise you, if there even is like some small overlap in the region that you are applying to, make that apparent and even talk about more about what your interest in that region is, because you will be working primarily on that type of work.
Great, thank you. I'm also curious, and again, folks, I really invite you, this is a wonderful time to pick Risha's brain and get insight into the organization and their process. You talked about interns that are undergrads. You talked about graduate fellows that are graduate students or recent graduates. Could you translate some of the other job descriptions that folks might see on the site and how that might correspond to different levels of experience in education?
Yep, definitely. So like I mentioned, those are the two educational requirements that we have for interns and graduate fellows. For associate level positions, we don't have any degree requirements per se. So it can be an undergraduate degree or graduate degree, but each posting will list exactly what that position is looking for. But generally for associate level positions, we look for at least 1 to 3 years of professional experience. Doesn't have to be a similar organization. It can be from any different type of organization working in the same international affairs space. That being said, we've had plenty of McLarty team members come from a variety of backgrounds, whether it's foreign service, government, even Peace Corps volunteers, grassroots organizations, things like that. So being able to convey how your experience best suits the position, I think, is the most important.
Great. And then is there a level above associate that folks who might be more mid-career would aspire to?
At the moment, we don't have mid-career positions open up, but of course, as an associate, if you do come on and that's a strong fit and that need does arise, we would consider that.
Great. So our first question is, could you speak about the tasks that an intern or grad assistant would usually take on?
Great, yeah. So a lot of the tasks that interns and graduate fellows take on, again, this differs from region to region. And my colleague Alden is also here, so I'll welcome him to join in too. A lot of the tasks involve tracking the news, so understanding what is happening on that region on a day-to-day basis. And as many of you know, international affairs, there's a lot going on around the world all the time. So understanding what is happening, especially in your region with the stakeholders that we're involved with, and how to explain that to a client who may not have the international affairs background or the strong understanding of the implications of that. Being able to understand and explain that is important. So news tracking, being able to find that information, like I mentioned. So if there is a new bill or a new regulatory issue coming up, being able to research that and pull up a quick summary. So that's what interns and graduate fellows would be helping with. Other than that, I know there's a lot of editing involved. There are different regular deliverables that we work on, like a navigator, but I'll invite Alden to step in and explain that a bit more.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Alden Hartopo. I'm a senior associate in the Asia team. And I've been with the firm for about 3.5 years now. Actually, I went to SIS, so I'm part of the APSIA kind of family there. So just quickly on kind of the work that our interns and graduate fellows work on, in addition to what Rich said, tracking the news is of course really important. We all do that together. But I think first of all, it varies team by team. Personally, the graduate fellows in my team have been very involved on drafting a lot of our client notes. Sometimes this could be an election that happened, so they typically take the first draft of drafting kind of like what's happening, why is it important, kind of giving their take. And of course, that goes through the round of edits through our entire team. And, for example, my practice lead, Ambassador Blake, would kind of add his, 2 cents and add his analysis. So we kind of like let that graduate fellow take that first draft. And a lot of times, majority of the work does stay in that draft. So there is a sense of ownership. It's not like we take the information and we kind of, completely change it. We actually use what you write, which is why we look for really strong writers, because a lot of the times these client notes are read by executives and Fortune 200 companies. In fact, we've had reports that have, that graduate fellows have been involved with that have gone to C-suite level CEOs of Fortune 5 companies. So, we really, really look for those strong writers, and along the process, we do take a number of steps to test for that. Other types of work involves, attending different business roundtables, representing the firm at different events, whether they're think tank events, chamber events. It's a great networking opportunity, of course, in more of a pre-COVID era where you actually get a chance to sit in a roundtable with a lot of senior executives, government relations professionals from a lot of large companies. So that's always an interesting opportunity for our graduate fellows to represent the firm there. And of course, like we said, a lot of ad hoc research assignments. Sometimes they want kind of a summary on a new regulation. Sometimes they also want stakeholder mapping. You want to pull together a slide deck on kind of like, who are their quote unquote allies you should be working with, kind of the different organizations that would be favorable to their interests, and looking for helping identify the stakeholders for whatever their end objective might be. So there's honestly a lot, and we kind of just really point out on the major and most common deliverables, but I'm happy to talk further about any particular kind of work you might be interested in.
Many thanks to you both. And I realize that you are all grad students and you don't need me to read your questions for you. So Elena, would you please summarize the question that you had and pose it to Risha?
Yeah, of course. First of all, nice to meet you. My question is, given that I'm currently based in Europe And I actually have a specific focus on Eurasia problems, actually on Russia. So my focus is on Russia and sanctions mainly. Would it be more fitting for me to apply to the Brussels office rather than in DC? And do they also have openings for graduate fellowships in Brussels?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So our Europe team, both based in DC and Brussels, works very, very closely. So I would say you can apply for either, but as you are based in the EU, it would make sense to apply for openings in Brussels for the Brussels office. So there are periodic openings for internship and graduate fellowships there, but they are handled separately. So I'd advise you to just keep an eye out when those openings occur. And we will definitely let you know as well. So I will sharing my contact information right now as well. If anyone interested or with questions would like to send that my way, that would be great.
Thank you so much.
And Risha, would those postings also live on the McLarty site, or is there a separate site for the Brussels office?
I don't believe there's a separate site for that, but on the McLarty page, it would be a good place. Yeah.
Risha, I think we typically have our Brussels bit separate because of some of the compliance issues. So it would be on our LinkedIn page for sure.
LinkedIn. Yeah.
The joy of GDPR. Renuka, please, if you would share your question. Did we lose you, or did I just butcher your name? Also possible. There. Charlotte, I'm going to stop you right there. We cannot hear you. So I'm going to read your question and then we will enable. So she was curious whether you could speak a little bit more about the kind of research work that graduate fellows do, and particularly if there's any statistical languages that would be preferred.
Yep, great question. So no statistical languages preferred or required. Much of the research work, like we mentioned, is involving tracking the news as well as looking at different research that's published by multilateral or international institutions. So looking at reports, publications, things like that, but no statistical languages experience or ability required.
Yeah, it's very open source, and a lot of it also comes from our sources, and we develop our own contacts, so we take a lot of intelligence from our friends in the region. Probably the closest it gets is Excel every now and then. I mean, I was international economics grad student, so I did have a lot of technical skills that I have never used since starting at the firm.
I will be sure to tell your dean that, Eldon. Paul, Leon, please, your question.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for being with us. So I just got my doctorate from SAIS, and I'm also a military vet. So my question is geared towards mid-career level entry points at McLarty. Thanks.
Great question. Thank you, Paul. So at the moment, we don't have open applications for mid-career opportunities, but of course, it's great to stay connected with you in case those do come up. So again, I would echo to continue to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and of course, reach out to me for any questions in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Alina, please.
Hi, thank you so much for your insights and for your time. I had a question about the part-time internship program over the spring semester. Is that something, well, number one, how many hours per week would that require? And how exactly is that conducted? Like, do we get tasks and then we're sort of allowed to or able to do them at whatever time? Or do we sort of have to be online and logged in at a specific time during a certain number of days of the week? Just so I can sort of get a sense of how to manage it with like class schedules and all. Thank you.
Thanks, Alina. Is this question for the research exercise or writing tasks just generally throughout the internship?
This would be, I mean, it depends on the types of tasks that the interns receive. So like, for instance, if most of the tasks are research oriented or writing, what would sort of the requirements be for like how exactly we can do them and when we can do them. So like, for instance, if like you require like, I'm guessing like 10 hours of an intern's time, then do we sort of have to be online during a certain number of like hours during a certain time frame? Or can we do it like, can we complete our work like at night or in the afternoon or in the morning, depending on how our class schedule is?
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for explaining that. In short, yes, we have you. This differs from practice to practice, depending on if you're a full-time or a part-time graduate fellow. But in short, in the schedule and the hours that you are allotted, we expect you to be online and working on the research and writing task, just because it makes it easier for you to collaborate with your team. So when they are also online at the same time. That being said, you're welcome to take on additional tasks if you need during that allotment. But for all sakes and purposes, it's easier if you are working during the time period that we know that you are online.
Thank you.
Risha, I'm also curious, you talked about some of the things that help an application really stand out: writing skills, clear research, clear connection to the position that they're applying for. But then you also talked about the need to demonstrate teamwork. Are there good ways that students can do that that don't come across as terribly cheesy or empty, that really resonate with you as you're reading applications?
That's a really great question, Carmen. I think this is something that applicants veer away from, but it's actually rewarding to see any conflict that has come up with a team, either in an interview or your cover letter, to highlight how you've been able to resolve and accomplish something with the team, especially when it was difficult, because sometimes there will be things that come up last minute and you have to communicate with your team members and be on the same page when you were not originally. So demonstrating that in your application, showing how you were able to work on a project or a deliverable with the team, especially through something challenging, is important. And it really does stand out when someone does that.
Thank you. Are there other questions that folks have? Again, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will make sure you get all of the great wisdom that we can impart to you in the time that we have. I'm also curious, we've talked about various international languages, we've talked about statistical languages. Are there other key skills that students should build now if they want to compete for these positions going forward through their coursework or through other experiences?
Yeah, definitely. I can kind of share my own perspective, and Alden, of course, you can jump in. Definitely the language ability. So if you are just a general knowledge of the region, of course, is important. But if you're already working on the language, any language or the language of that region, definitely knowing and strengthening those skills is important. I would also say writing style and writing skill. So again, being able to synthesize a large amount of information or a complex issue and boiling it down is really important. So I know there's a number of courses out there that offer that type of writing skill, and it really just comes with practice. So just practicing that over and over and challenging yourself for different areas or issues you might not feel as confident in or as experienced in, knowing how to look for research or get answers to questions that you don't know the answer to. That's definitely a skill you can work on from now.
And I would add, I remember when I was at SIS, there's one, we have them called Skills Institutes, in which were kind of these 1-credit courses to kind of build on specific skills. And one of the ones that I took that I found incredibly useful was something called, I think it's called Briefing Policymakers. It was taught by a current individual professor who was a CIA senior analyst, and he, did a lot of work briefing the president, briefing, a lot of cabinet secretaries. So he kind of taught us how to, brief orally, but also how to write, and I think there's a lot of these classes about policy, memo writing, right? And I think that's, even though it's a bit different, there's a ton of overlaps. The bottom line up front and all these different kind of terminology you might have heard is very much applicable. It's all about staying concise, being short, and sometimes you only have 30 seconds to brief someone. Sometimes these kind of concepts are really important to have when writing kind of a memo for a client. So I mean, just if you see those courses, absolutely take them. That's a great way to kind of look for practical ways to improve your writing outside of, more of the 20-page academic writing.
Not to make this sound like a Cosmo interview, but are there any things that sort of turn you off in an application that are immediate red flags that students should avoid doing?
Yeah, I would say this is really obvious, but typos, like we see a ton of typos from McLarty or something similar. Even though it's, human error, totally understandable. Just having that attention to detail is very, very important. Like we've echoed over and over, we often have fast turnaround for client deliverables, and that attention to detail is very, very important when you put work in front of a client. So making your application as polished and as perfect as you can, that's definitely important. And besides that, the writing sample part of an application, you are welcome to submit part of a research paper, any type of writing that you think is the strongest, that aligns with the topic that's given. But I would say do try your best to submit a writing sample that is leaning more towards business writing rather than academic writing. Of course, it's not going to completely disqualify your application if you turn in a research paper. That's totally understandable. But being able to look at your writing sample and understand what you're talking about in 3 pages is important.
Yeah, the number of times someone has spelled the name McLarty wrong is pretty ridiculous. For us, it just says that they don't have a lot of attention to detail. They're a bit careless. So that says a lot about, their own kind of writing and research that kind of turns us off as well, in addition to just, making a mistake.
And I know I can echo that too from the number of applications I get to all sorts of variations on APSIA. So baseline, folks, do the bare minimum, like spelling things correctly or copying and pasting correctly from the website. Well, we're almost out of time and I don't see any more questions, but Eldon, is there any other great wisdom that you would impart to students as they get excited about these opportunities and really want to start to compete for them?
I think one thing we haven't mentioned yet is that interns and graduate fellows also have the chance to attend events. So virtual and in-person events when that was safe, attend events as note takers, get the main points of the event for clients, but also the side part of that is the networking aspect. So even at events or within the McLarty team, there's so much opportunity to network. So again, things that you can be doing right now is building those networking skills, being able to understand what your own career trajectory is and how McLarty aligns with that. That's something to always consider and introspect to.
One piece of advice I always like, I guess this is something that I've noticed in a lot of applications is, even if you don't get in the first round, I would keep applying another round. Sometimes it's just a very, very competitive semester. Sometimes we have a particular set of needs, whether it's a language ability or something. So, if you don't hear back or if you don't kind of make it through to the end, please apply again. And during that time, take the time to intern elsewhere. I think I'm a big advocate of, some of the great kind of foundational experiences I found in applicants and for myself has been honestly working at a think tank, focusing on a region. That's been a great stepping stone for me to take the skills and network and kind of really get a chance to work with a lot of experts on a very certain policy issue or understand the region or US foreign policy in the region, and kind of using that as my stepping stone to work at MA. And to be honest, a lot of our interns and grad fellows do have think tank experience, specifically in a region for the most part. And for example, a lot of my interns have come from the CSIS Asia programs. And I think a lot of that just speaks to a lot of the quality of the programs there. So great stepping stones, I would say, to help you be more competitive for these jobs.
That's great advice, particularly since it sounds like they don't have to have the business experience to transition to the business side or a deep Rolodex in the government to be great candidates. So everyone, with that, since I'm not seeing any other questions, and since Risha and Eldon have very graciously shared their contact information in the chat box, I think I'm going to give you all back 15 minutes of your day. But we want to say thank you so much to both of you for sharing your insight and your wisdom, and thanks to all of the students for joining us here today. As I mentioned, a recording will be available on the APSIA YouTube page as soon as technology will permit it to get up there. And I look forward to seeing all of our students at future APSIA webinars, and Risha and Eldon at future APSIA events, when we can hopefully make it easy for you to find some of the great folks that come out of APSIA schools. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.